his masterpiece, of course. Everybody knows that Things Fall Apart was written in 1958 when he was just 28 years old. And it's been translated into 50 different languages. Now, many expect that he'd have probably won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Do you think he will now, maybe like posthumously?
I don't think they do it posthumously. And I also think the Nobel is a very political prize. I mean, it's a wonderful thing, and I'm happy, for example, that it's come to Nigeria once. But it's not necessarily a measure of how good a writer is. It's quite political. So you have people who will sort of talk about how somebody Chinese got it this year, so next year it can be in Asia, that sort of thing. And so no, I've never been bothered by the fact that Achebe didn't get the Nobel. I don't think that in any way takes away from really what I think is just the wonderful body of work that is left behind. What I think is a worthy and important way of judging a writer is how much you're read and how much you're remembered. And Achebe wrote books that people will read, and he created characters that were just indelible. People talk about Okonkwo as though he actually existed. And for me, Arrow of God is actually his real masterpiece. And Ezolo, who is the main character in Arrow of God, for me is a real breathing person. I think that's actually the real measure of excellence in writing. Writing in general comes from a place of dissatisfaction. A place of we exist in one reality and we want to create another. But because he wrote realistic fiction, and I think that what he did really was in writing Things Fall Apart and Arrow of God in particular, which are sort of the pre-colonial books, that he brought a kind of dignity to our stories. So before Achebe wrote, really African writing was some well-meaning English person would write an account of native life and it would be an African novel. And I think what Achebe did was he just brought this dignity. He told our stories and he gave it such dignity. For many people, Achebe isn't just literature. He's also history. He's also a sense of pride. There are people for whom the idea of themselves as Igbo people, as Nigerians, as Africans, really is rooted in Achebe's work.
And so back to the crux of the matter, the establishment of such a body as the one Mr. Alfred did while he was alive. It points to the fact that we also can dream and envisage things, but probably not have an end in mind, not have a particular perspective as to how that particular stuff should run its full course from its start to the finish. You get to see this in the many fields of studies and in the different walks of life where people have come to gain grants, gain scholarships, gain admissions to institutions founded for the advancement of knowledge, for the advancement and the betterment of our world. And one begins to ask himself, as Mr. Emmanuel will ask himself, what happens to the black man? What has been their focus? It mustn't be the case that, the black man must win the Nobel Prize, but be that as it may, let's look at the crux of the issue. How late have we come to the technological fore? How late have we come to the realms of modern day sophisticated ways of looking at technology and how such get to operate, and how ready and how willing are we to go forward? How much are we putting in? How much are we staking? What are the things our politicians get to promise us during elections as to give us this ginger and to give us this motivation to want to vote them into offices, to want to kill ourselves and fight for them, to want to be talks for them? What do our leaders get to tell us when they come to ask us for our votes? Because while you might believe that votes don't count, if nobody comes out to vote on election day, you cannot reach such election because the election never held, because nobody ordinarily was there to vote. So it still goes one way or the other to say that power still belongs to the people. As much as we want to debate and ask ourselves indeed where power belongs. And just like in the Game of Thrones, we'll be told that power belongs where the people actually think power gets to reside. But we all know where it is. How many can they kill if it's a matter of protest? How many can they suppress? How many can they subjugate? How many can they suppress? And how many can they continue to torture until we get it right, demanding what we ordinarily need to do? Because still, the economy has not permitted things to get to function well. The economy and the politics that is the reality of the average Nigerian still places such a person at the far end of the food chain, and sometimes we are not even in the chain where you consider the food chain. Sometimes we are the other realm where you can see us as those contributing to the larger food web, as to how our lives have been dictated for us and how our lives have come to be in Nigeria, in Africa, and by extension to as many places where people still get to stifle themselves. And so, as we continue to navigate the question as to whether an African, not just an African, a black man, though I don't believe in the idea of black, but at least we all have an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about black. What is stopping the black man from advancing in science and technology? What is stopping the black man from progressing in the ways such a man ordinarily wants to progress, would ordinarily dream of progressing? It is what has been sold to him that he gets to buy. It is the ideas that have been made readily available for such a person, and the level of criticism that can come with the acquisition of such knowledge and how to better such knowledge that we should be talking about. And in the 21st century, the black man hasn't been given a whole lot of opportunities. He has been deprived a whole lot. And this is not in isolation to his own participation in what has come to become such a reality. He also cannot lay claim of being innocent to his enslavement, him being innocent to where he has come to find himself to be. There are many persons in Nigeria who still get to hold beliefs concerning how to give birth to children. You know, the whole idea of giving birth to children as the Hebrew women did. It's a thing that has come to disturb a whole lot of persons, and I've come to see to the death of a whole lot of women down there, and not just in Nigeria, across the continent and in other places where these various forms of ideas people get to hold come up from. And I don't know for how long we would continue the way we are going until we get our health education right. I remember when I was in secondary school and I was being taught by Miss Dorothy Ogbidi, and we had a whole lot of discussions spanning different places and different topics of interest, and one of them revolved around childbirth and around the reproductive system. And someone like Mr. Gabriel, then we used to call them student teachers, would tell us a whole lot of stuff about the reproductive system of our body and of our species, and not just, and they also extend to other animals. And so as I continue to get to read from different places how women get to die from causes of death easily preventable, I shrink, and I really don't know what to say, because we're in the 21st century and geopolitics have made it the case that, you know, a whole lot of persons would continue to remain in ignorance for the geopolitical agendas to get to thrive and to get to move ahead and to get to flourish. You see this everywhere, and so you find these women who tell themselves that, you know, I have to give birth like the Hebrew women, as opposed to the very reason why that particular anecdote even came to be, giving birth before the soldiers came, giving birth before the executioners of their babies came, as opposed to giving birth by themselves with no medical aid, because Shipra and poor that were placed as nurses to make sure they get to report every birth, and by extension every male birth done by the Hebrew women in their so-called captivity in Egypt, could come and then do whatever they got to do. Shipra and Pua did what? What did they do? They said, "Oh, you king, these women are so strong. Before we came, they had delivered of themselves. They are so very strong, and they barely need help." Not even to talk about the authenticity of the story, removing the allegorical meanings that can be attached to such, or the level of anthropomorphism that has been used in such descriptions. A whole lot of persons still go on with this particular narrative that they must give birth as Hebrew women, they must give birth as the Hebrews did. And one begins to ask himself, the number of deaths that get to happen still doesn't ring a bell to us. But why would such ring a bell in a country where the mortality rate at birth is still very, very alarming, and almost nobody gets to think about it, nobody gets to really have concrete conversations that the Minister of Health, only God knows what they have been doing ever since we got into this new dispensation and this new republic. But women have been dying. It's a simple thing I've been trying to say here. And the majority of them have been dying from ignorance, from things ordinarily not made clear to them, from things not explained to them, from things ordinarily that would have been explained and made possible in simpler ways and in simpler versions that their psychology, their level of cognition would come to tell them. So how did our mothers, before the advent of our colonizers and new ways of thinking, how did such generation get to give birth to kids? I say this and I feel very sad, but it is what it is, and it brings me to the post of somebody I respect so much, and somebody I get to follow his train of thought and his line of thinking so closely, and this is Mr. Emmanuel James Ibanyao, and he posted this not too long ago. He said, "Today, announcements have opened for the 2024 Nobel Prizes, starting with medicine and physiology. It has been 122 years of incredible work by the Nobel Foundation, sustaining the prizes, furthering exceptional human achievement, and impacting our world. While literature exposed me to the prizes, my interest has somewhat shifted to the core sciences, especially physics, a field at the heart of much of modern technology. Of the 224 winners of the physics Nobel thus far, none is black. In fact, none in all the sciences. I am hoping the jinx will be broken in this series." That's the forthcoming series. "As a management major passionate about structure, culture, and process engineering, I am fascinated by how the foundation has kept this thing going like a perfect circle for over a century, doling out around $1 million each to the now 6 yearly winners and sustaining its reputation. Alfred Nobel willed his estates to a cause that would advance human knowledge, the sciences and humanism. Managing those estates to immortalize his vision is a work of spectacular brilliance. In this short post is laden with a whole lot of meaning and a whole lot of appreciation for something good, an institution such as the one we've come to have and keep and appreciate and sometimes criticize as to those that get to award and those that don't get to award yearly. But we know how these things work. They can only award these awards or these prizes to an exceptionally a few people once in a year, and sometimes many persons don't get to achieve it in their lifetime. I remember when Chinua Achebe died, Chimamanda was being asked what her take was that Chinua Achebe didn't win the Nobel Prize and how that made her feel as a person, and I love the response she gave.
You know his masterpiece, of course. Everybody knows that Things Fall Apart was written in 1958 when he was just 28 years old. And it's been translated into 50 different languages. Now, many expect that he'd have probably won the Nobel Prize for Literature. Do you think he will now, maybe like posthumously?
I don't think they do it posthumously. And I also think the Nobel is a very political prize. I mean, it's a wonderful thing, and I'm happy, for example, that it's come to Nigeria once. But it's not necessarily a measure of how good a writer is. It's quite political. So you have people who will sort of talk about how somebody Chinese got it this year, so next year it can be in Asia, that sort of thing. And so no, I've never been bothered by the fact that Achebe didn't get the Nobel. I don't think that in any way takes away from really what I think is just the wonderful body of work that he's left behind. What I think is a worthy and important way of judging a writer is how much you're read and how much you're remembered. And Achebe wrote books that people will read, and he created characters that were just indelible. People talk about Okonkwo as though he actually existed. And for me, Arrow of God is actually his real masterpiece. And Ezolo, who is the main character in Arrow of God, for me is a real breathing person. I think that's actually the real measure of excellence in writing. Writing in general comes from a place of dissatisfaction, a place of we exist in one reality and we want to create another. But because he wrote realistic fiction, and I think that what he did really was in writing Things Fall Apart and Arrow of God in particular, which are sort of the pre-colonial books, that he brought a kind of dignity to our stories. So before Achebe wrote, really African writing was some well-meaning English person would, write an account of native life, and it would be an African novel. And I think what Achebe did was he just brought this dignity. He told our stories, and he gave it such dignity. For many people, Achebe isn't just literature. He's also history. He's also a sense of pride. There are people for whom the idea of themselves as Igbo people, as Nigerians, as Africans, really is rooted in Achebe's work.
Amanda, we get to understand that somebody ordinarily should not be considered successful only from the perspective that the person gets to win a whole lot of awards or get lots of recognition while one happens to be alive. That is not always the case. Many persons go about their daily lives and get to die without much recognition while they are alive, and even if they die and not even get recognized, it doesn't still take away the fact that a thing is, regardless of whether it's known or not. Going back to the philosophical axiom, Biringkpa bin. So whether one gets to know something or one doesn't get to know something, if that thing is, the thing is as long as the thing is. The being of that particular thing continues to be in existence until such being ceases to be and becomes something else, either by way of accident or by way of causality or by way of natural degradation and and what have you. And so back to the crux of the matter, the establishment of such a body as the one Mr. Alfred did while he was alive points to the fact that we also can dream and envisage things, but probably not have an end in mind, not have a particular perspective as to how that particular stuff should run its full course from its start to the finish. You get to see this in the many many fields of studies and in the different walks of life where people have come to gain grants, gain scholarships, gain admissions to institutions founded for the advancement of knowledge, for the advancement and the betterment of our world. And one begins to ask himself, as Mr. Emmanuel will ask himself, what happens to the black man? What has been their focus? It mustn't be the case that, the black man must win the Nobel Prize, but be that as it may, let's look at the crux of the issue. How late have we come to the technological fore? How late have we come to the realms of modern day sophisticated ways of looking at technology and how such get to operate, and how ready and how willing are we to go forward? How much are we putting in? How much are we staking? What are the things our politicians get to promise us during elections as to give us this ginger and to give us this motivation to want to vote them into offices, to want to kill ourselves and fight for them, to want to be talks for them? What do our leaders get to tell us when they come to ask us for our votes? Because while you might believe that votes don't count, if nobody comes out to vote on election day, you cannot rig such election, because the election never held, because nobody ordinarily was there to vote. So it still goes one way or the other to say that power still belongs to the people. As much as we want to debate and ask ourselves indeed where power belongs. And just like in the Game of Thrones, we'll be told that power belongs where the people actually think power gets to reside. But we all know where it is. How many can they kill if it's a matter of protest? How many can they suppress? How many can they subjugate? How many can they suppress? And how many can they continue to torture until we get it right, demanding what we ordinarily need to do? And so you find somebody like John Obidi make the argument and the case that Nigerians and, in fact, Africans and people from third world countries still get to look at data from the point of view of quantity as data, so that you find Nigerians thinking about data in kilobytes, in megabytes, and how they get to do weekly subscription and daily subscription, because still the economy has not permitted things to get to function well. The economy and the politics that is the reality of the average Nigerian still places such a person at the far end of the food chain, and sometimes we are not even in the chain where you consider the food chain. Sometimes we are the other realm where you can see us as those contributing to the larger food web, as to how our lives have been dictated for us and how our lives have come to be in Nigeria, in Africa, and by extension to as many places where people still get to stifle themselves. And so to look at this from a broader perspective, to look at this from a broader point of view, these foundations have been there. People have been filing for grants, people have been applying for loans, people have been applying for ways to get to better their life. But one begins to ask, these persons getting to ask for this, are they really like asking for this for the genuine reason that they indeed would come to use this to further their research, or are they like looking for ways to get to better their life? I, as a person, don't know the answers particularly to give to you as it concerns how to navigate these questions and these inquiries. But what I can tell you is a whole lot of persons have come to change the course of their life and get to focus in what they have gotten to focus during the space of the reality of their existence. Reasons being that scholarships and grants were made accessible to them to get to further their lives. Just look at what $1 million can do for one's life, for a scientist's life who has been sometimes destined to die poor, if one wants to stick to serious ethical standpoints and things that get to speak up to the moralities that many persons don't want to look at nor talk about in our times and in our lives today. And so, as we continue to navigate the question as to whether an African, not just an African, a black man, though I don't believe in the idea of black, but at least we all have an idea of what we're talking about when we talk about black. What is stopping the black man from advancing in science and technology? What is stopping the black man from progressing in the ways such a man ordinarily wants to progress, would ordinarily dream of progressing? It is what has been sold to him that he gets to buy. It is the ideas that have been made readily available for such a person and the level of criticism that can come with the acquisition of such knowledge and how to better such knowledge that we should be talking about. And in the 21st century, the black man hasn't been given a whole lot of opportunities. He has been deprived a whole lot. And this is not in isolation to his own participation in what has come to become such a reality. He also cannot lay claim of being innocent to his enslavement, him being innocent to where he has come to find himself to be. As Dike Chukwumerije will say in his poem, "Today I saw a mysterious thing, a thing that vexed me to my very soul. I saw the black man dressed like a king, but he was crouching in the shadows with a begging bowl. His children were starving in fields of cassava, dying of diseases the palm kernel could cure, homeless in a land of rock and timber. Why are you here?" He said, "I am poor." But how can a man be poor in a land of rock and timber, and his children dying of diseases the palm kernel could cure? How can he be homeless in such a place? But he has, within his limited way of thinking and within the limited reality, he has come to imagine his life and given himself serious introspection in relation to the world, or boxing himself out of any relationship with where the modern world is in terms of globalization. He has told himself he's poor. He has told himself he cannot, transform what he sees around him to make sense of life, the same way the people of Zimbabwe couldn't ordinarily, to a large extent, get to transform the mystery that is in their land to the products their land grabbers and their landowners then did after the land got returned to them by the fight, and to the glory also of Robert Mugabe. So also the average Nigerian, the average farmer back home just sits down and tells himself, I do things within the set perspectives I have. I look at the timber and I don't look at other endless possibilities as to how this can be used beyond making chairs, beyond my own subsistent way of thinking. How can I understand the chemistry behind this? How can I interrogate and introspect and give ourselves better ways of understanding the science of botany, the science and the beauty of zoology, and what such can do to us? And to continue this line of thought, we look at the second stanza of Dike's poem. He said, "Today I saw a mysterious thing, a thing that vexed me to my very soul. I saw the black man dressed like a king, but lying in the dust crying at my feet. His legs were sturdy like the Iroko, his forests were rich and teeming with games, his muzzles they rippled like the proud Zambezi. I told him, get up. But he said, I am lame. And where is the lie in the 21st century? Colonialism has helped colonize and crippled our ways of thinking and our indigenous ways of doing things and behaving. But we also were not so much at peace. We also were people of science, but probably at a particular point, we lost it. Or we couldn't break the jinx that would have ordinarily transcended to the mystery we now currently have as the 21st century and the technology and the advancement we now have as a people down here. And so DK finds himself asking this man and wondering why the man is lying in the dust crying at his feet. Why the dust? Why are you lying in the dust where you have the river Zambezi? And not just even that, your muscles, they ripple in such a way. They ripple like they are full of life, they are full of vigor. They pump a whole lot of stuff down that particular stream and that particular path and way of life. Your legs, they are sturdy like the Iroko. Your muscles rippling like the proud Zambezi. Your forest rich and teeming with game. And yet you chose to be in the dust crying and asking, where will my help come from? And as the psalmist will say, our help will come from the Lord who made heaven and earth. But it doesn't stop there. The Lord, as we want to believe, who made heaven and earth, will not come down here to do anything for anybody, will not come down here to turn water into wine, will not come down here to till the soil for us, will not come down here to build houses we get to sleep in, will not come down here to solve our economic problems. And that Lord himself doesn't grant visas. He doesn't grant visas in as much as if granting a visa to a foreign country will be an answered prayer to an oppressed Nigerian, why not just solve the problem of the country so that such an immigrant will not even have the idea in the first place that will lead him to even apply for a visa or to apply to become a third-class citizen. So as many persons as those who get to have this idea that our help predominantly will come from the Lord who made heaven and earth, and that ends it without looking at the context actually upon which such foundation and claim should be actually investigated and looked at, it's ordinarily deceiving himself or herself. And so as we continue to try to tell ourselves, our help will come from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He has already made heaven and earth. He has allowed us to get to experiment a whole lot of things as to how the world ordinarily should run, as to how the world ordinarily should function. And so we see explorations going up to different places, and you might want to call it a new form of colonialism. You might want to call it a new form of occupation. You might want to call it a whole lot of things. But don't take away the fact that people are constantly, every day, making efforts to see that their citizens get to live a better life. Their country become better than them met it, and sometimes they fail in this process. Sometimes they crash, but at least they make the effort. We've seen the many times Elon has tried to send devices out of Earth to get to observe a whole lot of stuff down there. We've seen the many times he's failed, and how things have turned south for him and how things have gone the wrong way for him. But he doesn't stop there. He doesn't stop there, and it's the thing we ordinarily should do, and it's the thing we ordinarily don't get to do. We consign ourselves to the riches of the earth as it concerns cash policies, as it concerns our ability of grabbing money and having physical properties. As such, we live in hard times, we continue to live in sad times, and until we begin to look at things from other perspective, we might not just come to ordinarily understand how great a disservice we do ourselves when we continue to do the things we get to do. And what are the things we get to do to ourselves? We get to do to ourselves a whole lot of things that don't really help us. So that the guys up there in the hierarchy of governance have not really like looked at technology and looked at science from the real perspective we ordinarily should be looking at. And the continent, not just the continent, because sometimes it's very tempting to like box the entire continent as a single entity, and we're talking about a country here. How have we tried to make sense of our life as a people? How have we tried to understand our life down here? How have we reacted to our life? I'll tell you, one of the ways we've been told to stay where we are is the particular idea of not questioning our elders, of not criticizing authorities, of not speaking ill of monarchies and constituted authorities and how things have been before we arrived here. And we've juxtaposed that with respect. We've juxtaposed that with honor. We've seen that as being humble, as being far from the clutches of arrogance. And those who try to ask questions have been seen as rebels, have been seen as bad people, have been seen as kids who ordinarily would not go far, kids who ordinarily are doomed to fail and are doomed not to make progress in life. And so you find us staying where we are. You find us staying where we are without any possibility of moving forward. Even the traditional ways of thinking, the thing a whole lot of persons have been telling us to go back to, after our modern day encounter with colonialism and Christianity and Islam. We still find lots of loopholes in the practices we want and advocate for people to go back, making it a defeat already from the very, very beginning of we trying to even get to champion such movement. Because on what basis do we get to champion a break from Christianity and Islam, which are the popular religions back home, than the basis of the near caricature we have come to make of these bodies of thoughts and these religious sects and these ways of getting to look at things? Because we get to criticize the idea of statues and images in the Catholic Church, but then we want to fall back to engraving images and having these, and we want to criticize the idea of praying with rosaries, but then we also find ourselves at the other side of some unhealthy practices and environments of worship that sometimes tend to hamper the health of the adherents of such. Sometimes we want to tell ourselves that, there's so much mystery and so much confusion in the religion of the so-called white man. But then we turn to our own religion and we get to see also that there's a whole lot of stuff going down there, and there's a whole lot of mystery, and there's even no literature to start with as compared to the literature provided by the next man. Not saying the next man's religion is better, but I'm just like trying to say that we're not allowed to even question authorities. We're not even allowed to ask questions as the way we even get to ask questions about Christianity and Islam to a great extent. There's so much mystery and this idea of mystification around the very things we aspire to go back to. But that is a conversation for another day. Back here, we're talking about the inability to question authority, the inability to challenge principles, ethics, cultures, or the trouble that come with you trying to do that. The trouble that come with you trying to ask very, very important questions. You trying to ask, why am I supposed to do this? Why am I supposed to do this? Why am I supposed to do this? Because if we don't ask questions, if we don't allow ourselves room to ask questions, if we don't allow ourselves to build a culture of taking responsibility for the actions we get to commit, or the realities that get to become our lives based on the decisions taken by religious leaders, spiritual directors, our political leaders, the few persons running and working in the scientific side of our life, or the medical perspective of the daily realities of a place like Nigeria. We don't question them and we don't bring them to get to answer questions. I don't know how we want to make progress, and I doubt if we would come to get to any reasonable conclusions in life. Because if you look at the likes of Ptolemy, you get to see his idea of a geocentric way of looking at the universe. You know, for a very long time it was the fact that the sun revolved around the earth. And then came guys like Copernicus, then came guys like Galileo, then came guys like Isaac Newton, then came Albert Einstein, and a whole lot of persons. There was Kepler, the Newtonian mechanics saw to it that we got to understand the world from a different perspective, but it wasn't done by one person alone. And even before these guys came, Aristotle's mechanics had been a thing studied for a very long period of time and still being used in our modern day. And you get to see it in the whole idea of motion, in the whole idea of the ideas surrounding what we've come to have in modern day. And I know a great chunk of physics, as it concerns times past, would now just be like, for the history of physics and all that, almost like a breakage in modern day of thinking and modern day of doing things. But it still goes back to the very beginning, where we started from. As you live your life here on earth, how willing are you to question the assumptions and the beliefs and the norms you've come to hold so dearly? How ready are you to change, and how well do you want to change, even in the face of evidence, in the face of proof, in the face of truth? How sad do you get to feel to let go? How tight have you come to hold your beliefs and your ideas as though they are farewell hugs, as though they're as close as your skin? Because if we are not ready to question our assumptions, if we are not ready to question our beliefs, and if we are not ready to think outside the box and pray that good fortune and providence or fate or fatum, as it will be said in Latin, would get to offer us, so that we get to invoke change in our times. And sometimes what we expect to be changed might not be something so big, might just be a little innovation down the line, a little way of looking at life, a little way of looking at our world, our perspective, a little way of growing our family. Because like Father Jude Tochukwu would get to say, the deeds of a woman in the Amazon jungle might never come to the forefront of the news, or get to be told 1,000 times and in different literatures as the Elizabethan age, and the stories that people get to tell down that particular perspective as to the many Elizabeths that have come to grace the literature of the English, or the Baroque period and what have you. So from hindsight, we look at history and tell ourselves, that man did great, that person did great. Dostoevsky wrote beautiful novels, but he died broke. William Shakespeare left us a great chunk of material, but how did he die? Oh, Alfred Nobel left a great chunk of his estate, and today it has grown and it has multiplied and it has become 1,000 times what he left behind. Oh, Galileo did this. Oh, Copernicus did this. Oh, Maria Curie did this. Oh, Heisenberg brought about a whole lot of stuff as it concerns uncertainty. Oh, Archimedes did a whole lot of stuff with his idea of Eureka and the idea of the principle of flotation. Oh, Pascal talked a whole lot about pressure. Oh, Pascal Blaise did a whole lot of stuff in logic and mathematics and still held his grounds as maybe a logical Christian. Oh, this happened. Oh, that happened. Oh, this person wrote this. Oh, that person wrote that. Oh, Chinua Achebe left us a collection of works that will stand the test of time. All these are beautiful. All these are beautiful, but what times do we live in? How difficult is it for us to comfortably live as Nigerians, as black people, in relation to every other person in the world? What are we doing? You as an Indian, how are you trying to improve your life? You as a European, how are you trying to respond to the needs of the world? You as an American, what are you doing to see that life gets better? You as an Asian, what are the improvements that can come from your own quarter? And how far and how wild and how different can you think? And how, like Dostoevsky, you come to say, I have a plan to go mad. How well can we do these things, and how well can we tell ourselves that we indeed can grow better, can grow stronger? Because indeed, the world is in constant need of good people. Because in the absence of good people, there is a replacement. Whatsoever your take on dualism means, whether from an ethical standpoint or a philosophical perspective, or from the idea of realism or functionalism and all that. But when there's nothing in one direction, in most cases, if not all, there's the opposite. And so when the world is short of good people in politics, in our sciences, in literature space, and the body that gets to make decisions on different parts and the way we get to perceive reality, what do we get to see? We get to see the downfall of a particular civilization. We get to see ourselves spiral down and die. And remember how we started. There's still women today in Nigeria who believe that they have to give birth as the Hebrew women. There are women who still believe that if it's not their pastor praying for them at times of birth, as though they had intercourse with their pastors, that they will not give birth, or they will not go to the hospital, or they will not pay attention to both antenatal care and postnatal care and hospital checkups. And it's not as though these things are very affordable in Nigeria and most women get to ordinarily just reject them. It's not. If you look at what it takes in recent times to put to bed in a place like Nigeria, in a hospital, you get to just sit down and you just shake your head and cry. Because there was a point we felt we've gotten to a breaking point in Nigeria. There was a point we felt in Africa that we've seen enough sorrow, and we've seen enough shaggy, and we've seen enough sadness. There was a point in geopolitics and in conversations around the world where we thought that, we wouldn't go beyond this particular level. We wouldn't become so baseless. We wouldn't become so idiotic in the ways we get to live life and in the ways we get to be. But then we were just joking. We were just fantasizing. We were just deceiving ourselves, because nothing has come to support such. And so in Nigeria, you get to see things become very expensive. Hospitals have never been a thing a whole lot of persons have been able to afford in their life, and most persons have never been to a hospital in Nigeria for the sake of going to receive treatment. And a few who have gone there with trepidation, not wanting to find out the next problem they get to have in their system, so that they don't get to spend their last saving. And And Victor Daniel recently posted something. He posted a post he shared a post someone made, and in that particular post he talked about how he and his family came to spend all their savings when the wife was to put to bed. And he wouldn't have spent that much if he was in a country where things ordinarily worked. He wouldn't have spent that much if the healthcare sector was functioning. He wouldn't have spent that amount of money if basic things were kept in place, if pharmaceutical industries were cited within the reach of the so-called black man, if the politics around the manufacturing of medical facilities and aids and the technologies behind that were made available for the black man, as Mr. Emmanuel James Ebanya will get to point out in many other videos he get to make. And it begs the question, yes, we know geopolitics is a crazy place to be in. We know we are like billions of hours late already as it concerns making progress. But we cannot give up. Giving up is the worst thing. James Bowen would get to say, I cannot afford despair because I cannot sell that to the next child. I cannot afford to tell myself that the world cannot be better because I cannot tell that to the generation coming. So also myself, I cannot accept despair, because when we accept despair, we give up the very thing that keeps us going. We give up the very thing that see to it that we move in our lives day after day in peace, trying to still make sense of our existence. And so someone like Theodore Roosevelt will get to tell us in his poem, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who errs, who comes short again and again, who knows that there's no effort without error and shortcoming, who actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, who knows the great devotions associated with work, who in the end, if he succeeds, comes to know the triumph of high achievement. And if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall not be with those cold and timid souls who neither know success nor defeat. Men who've refused to get their ship out of the harbor, men who've told themselves, I have a perfect ship, as though that was what ships were made for. As though a doctor who says he's afraid of blood and is scared of seeing blood will make a good surgeon. As though an athlete who never leaves his house or his room to get to practice would ordinarily get to make a good athlete. As though if Usain Bolt was one who just sat down in a particular place, such would come to make progress. And so the questions continue on and on and on. And so as the Nobel Foundation sets to release, supposed to be awarded the awards for this year, we hope that you and I would also come to make efforts to get to better the world we get to find ourselves, be it from the research we get to do, be it from the ways we get to live our lives. Because someone like Copernicus never sat down and had this great idea that he ordinarily would come to debunk everything someone like Ptolemy got to propose in his lifetime. Someone like Kepler never sat down and told himself, I'm going to revolutionize physics and give a new sense to what we've come to have as Newtonian and mechanics and the likes of that. Someone like Newton never sat down and told himself, what I'm about to do is going to change the course of the world forever. Neither did Heisenberg and Albert Einstein tell themselves this, they started somewhere, they had an idea and they pushed it to a logical conclusion. And even the likes of Dostoevsky, he, in his works and all that came to be his life, his time in Serbia, his time in the different political parties he belonged to, his life as a gambler, and his life as an author. And in our modern time, we would not want to come to consider him a successful author because he died broke, right? But then look at the body of work he left for us. And a great chunk of things, from the gambler to Crime and Punishment to the idiot, to a whole lot of other things. We also need to try to see to it that whatever we get to do, we try to put our best foot forward, gain stamina, talk to the next man, share researches, share ideas, and get to a point where we come to have the world and the people that live in it in mind. And on the issue of geopolitics, there are a whole lot of wars around our world, and sometimes I don't just understand how we come to fight so much. And if I should borrow the idea of the face and the other from Emmanuel Levinas, the French philosopher, you get to see the idea of we being so advanced, at least so we want to tell ourselves in the 21st century, and we still fighting the way we get to fight. We have developed our sciences and the ways we get to think, but we've developed speed. We've also not really come to look at the things that mean a whole lot to us, so that dead bodies just look like numbers before us now on the screen. So that we talk about the war in Gaza, the war in Syria, the current airstrikes between Lebanon, Iran, and Israel, as though we are reading a fiction, as though we are watching the Star Wars, as though we are watching a thriller. But these are real-time issues. These are things that would continue to affect our politics up until the point where we tell ourselves that we must come to accept peace. Until the point we tell ourselves that we cannot continue like this. While our inventions and innovations that come with science is a thing everybody should put their right foot forward, the ethics behind it also is a thing we need to look at squarely. It's a thing we need to pay serious attention. The literature that comes to govern the ways we get to look at ethics, the way we get to look at our sense of morality, the way we get to look at our engagement with the next person also has to be brought for circumspection, and we also sit back, retreat, get a retrospection as to how we are going. Everything mustn't just be about profit making, as wars around the world have come to tell us, because there's currently crisis in Sudan. Ethiopia has been fighting. Syria has been in conflict. Yugoslavia has not recovered from whatever is the politics down there. The Gulf area, what also came to be called the Gulf Wars, and Libya is still down there. You know, the Middle East is still being plagued with a whole lot of unrest, and you get to see the sense in why many persons don't want to give birth to kids. How whatsoever their reasons might be, you cannot really blame them completely, because we are developing machine minds and machine hearts, and the way we get to live and the way we get to be and the way we get to stay in relation to the next person, the way we get to relate around ourselves revolves around utilitarianism, revolves around making use of the next person as an object, as opposed to the subject we all ordinarily should be. And so you also find this funny idea when even the US Constitution was drafted. You get to see the idea of, they said, we hold this truth to be self-evident, that man was created with inalienable rights. To such, you have the right to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and all that. But this constitution was was enacted and created in a time when slavery was still being practiced in the U.S. You get to see the complexity of our existence down here, because how could such be the case and slavery was just a thing side by side? And as such, we need introspection. We need to come over and over again to, you know, try to get meaning out of our lives and keep things in check. The rise of AI has come to tell us a whole lot of things about ourselves and how capitalistic and as how self-centered sometimes we can be. But someone like Alan Turing, who came up with this great idea alongside the team that worked with him for as long as they worked with him, also would not come to understand the current use we are putting his idea and the ideas of many persons that have worked and died and never saw to the current levels artificial intelligence has come to play in our modern times. I guess this was not the idea he was looking at, not to sell propaganda, not to sell conspiracies and the theories that come with this, but to ease man, to ease our universe, to ease women, to ease men. And how we started from the idea of infant mortalities in places like Africa and third world countries. We started also from the perspective that more needs to be done in terms of education, in terms of getting to explain things to these people, and also in terms of breaking the jinx and demystifying the politics and the policies that see to it that these people die, and these people die for lack of knowledge. If the scripture has to hold sway in anything, Hosea chapter 4 verse 6 gets to talk about people dying because of lack of knowledge and all that. Indeed, while a whole lot of persons might hold that ignorance is bliss, I as a person don't believe so. I believe ignorance isn't bliss. And as Friedrich Nietzsche will get to say, if the truth will kill them, let them die. And so as we try to look at a better world, a world where we all will live in peace and we all will live in advancement, may we come to help ourselves to be great. I am Obin Emeka. See you next time.